Welcome back to the Backyard Professor Videos commentary on the Book of Mormon. We are just getting into the first chapter of First Nephi. And we've met the characters of Lehi, Nephi, and some of the interesting historical, archaeological, linguistic ideas behind these people and the region roundabouts from where they came from, including the time frame of 600 BC. I think as a basic idea, now I haven't completely discussed the entire first chapter yet, but I will in detail. I am nowhere near done yet. However, we find even on a local setting. Now, what I mean by local setting is the Jerusalem environs about 600 BC. Back at that time, back at that specific geographical place, the interrelationship between the Hebrews and the Egyptians and how the Babylonians play into this also will be seen as I continue through the Book of Mormon. From a local contextualization, as it were, we see Nephi's record and Nephi's record-keeping style to be perfect. That is precisely how the Jews were participating in their culture in Jerusalem 600 BC. We've seen the local aspect of Lehi as a proper father teaching Nephi how to keep the records and how to have his visions. We see this family circle with Lehi as the leader, as the Arabic sheik, as Hugh Nibley described him, because Nephi several times in his record says, "And my father dwelt in a tent," once they went out into the wilderness. One remarkable aspect that I have found, this was, I will never forget when I first read this chapter on my mission way back in 1980. It tells you how old I am. Ugh. And my birthday's just right around the corner, January 12th. Yeah, baby. And I'm going to be a striking 48 years old, and I still act like I'm 18. Full of enthusiasm. That's right, I'll never lose it. Age is a mental construct anyway. Lehi as a representative man, Hugh Nibley in his magnificent Melchizedek Priesthood Manual, I believe 1959, probably 1957, I don't know exactly, an approach to the Book of Mormon. Chapter 4, Lehi as a representative man. When we enlarge this context, we see the local context come beautifully into focus and into play, demonstrating great power in the establishing of the authenticity of just the first page. Just the first verse. And I'm not even out of the first chapter yet. When we enlarge this to a world context, Lehi also fits that. Now this is interesting. It's correct on a local context. It's also correct on a world context. I like that. This world context is impressive. Lehi does not belong. Now this is in chapter 4, pages 46, 47, 48, 49, 50, 51, blah, blah, blah. Lehi does not belong in the fantastic world that passed as the ancient Near East a few years ago. He is at home in a very different kind of a world, and a very real world. Now thanks to the ethno-historical, the linguistic, the geographical, the archaeological, the historical, the psychological, the religious, the political, and the legal, I am not exaggerating, as we have explored the various arenas with which to study the humanity and the principles and the ideas of the ancient Near East, our vision, our understanding has completely changed about the ancient Near East. And the Book of Mormon ends up being, in at least the first 40 pages, a rather typical representation of the ancient Near East. Utterly fascinating. And Joseph Smith's day, nothing of the kind. Now, right on. So this is interesting. In the brief compass of Nephi's account, which is an abridgment of his father's own journal, whose type it imitates and continues, as Nephi says. He said, I record some of the prophecies, the writings, the visions and dreams that my father Lehi had. And of course, Nephi, being the tenacious character of spirit that that man had, which is truly intimidating, he sought to know also, and he did whatever it took. A pretty impressive example for all the rest of us. We're spiritual pygmies compared to this Nephi guy. Anyway, he imitates his father's record keeping, which is another beautiful example of the proper manner of record keeping in the ancient Near East, incidentally. Well, we're given an amazing amount of information, both general and particular, regarding conditions of Lehi's day. From this, it can be shown that Lehi has an excellent claim to being a thoroughly representative type of person for his age. And this is fascinating, because as we enlarge the scope to see a greater context, it's there. It's there. This is not make-believe. This is not a fantasy. This is not a tissue of absurdity or wishful thinking on the part of LDS scholars. No, we have found the world scholars of the ancient Near East saying and showing us, this is it. This is the context. Quite remarkable thing here. Lehi was a man possessed of exceedingly great wealth, in the form of gold and silver and all manner of riches. The record says he had his own house at Jerusalem, yet he was accustomed to go forth from the city from time to time, and his paternal estate, the land of his inheritance, where the bulk of his fortune reposed, was some distance from the town. This is one of the issues that's basically discussed and argued now by Jeffrey Chadwick, I believe, the LDS archaeologist out of BYU. He came of an old, distinguished, and cultured family. The opening verse of the Book of Mormon explains the expression goodly parents, not so much in a moral sense as in a social one. Nephi tells us he came from a good family and therefore received a good traditional education. I was taught somewhat in all the learning of my father. He was one of the tribe of Manasseh, which of all the tribes, now this is interesting, the tribe of Manasseh, of all the tribes out there in this wild, woolly desert world area, they retained the old desert ways, and they were most active in the caravan trade. John Twetness has demonstrated quite powerfully that Lehi, realistically, he did deal with merchants and in merchandising. Nibley makes him a merchant all the way, but John Twetness, I believe, has amassed and adduced enough evidence to show that Lehi and Nephi were actual metal workers, which is quite remarkable also. It seems to have been particularly close ties to Sidon. Now, one of the most electrifying insights that Nibley has is he says this name appears repeatedly in the Book of Mormon. Sidon, of course, both in its Hebrew and Egyptian forms. So, Lehi, and I'm on page 49 now, Lehi, like his great contemporaries in the East and the West, what was he? Well, he had many factors building his character. He was a man of action and a dreamer. He was greatly worried about the future of Jerusalem, and his prayers and studies were rewarded by an apocalyptic vision. He attempts to make this public. They violently seek to take away his life. And being severely rebuffed, Lehi is ordered in a dream to take his family and take off. Get out of Jerusalem, it's going to be destroyed. They won't repent. From then on, he shows himself as a great leader and a colonizer, daring, resourceful, patient, and strong-minded. Yeah, some strong-minded, all right.